If you've ever been to any gym ever before, I'm sure you've seen this specimen. It's the guy who comes in day after day, week after week, and lifts the same weight. Usually in my experience, he'll be benching 185 for a couple reps, but your mileage may vary. According to a recent video by Fitness Faqs titled "The Forgotten Method for Getting Stronger," this guy is actually a genius. He's got it all figured out. While the rest of us are trying to get stronger, the real way to make gains is just to lift the same weights again and again and again until somehow you magically get stronger. In this video, I'm going to explore this concept seriously. I'm going to react to clips from the Fitness Faqs video and explain what steady state lifting is and if it actually has any application. So let's dive in. First, I want to begin by defining steady state lifting. According to the video, steady state lifting is lifting the same weight for the same amount of reps and sets for a predetermined period of time. It sounds like about 8 to 12 weeks. Then at the end of that period of time, you add some amount of weight to the bar and repeat the process over again. In the video, at least initially, this is presented as some kind of magic, as some kind of sorcery, as if they don't even understand why this works, but somehow it does. Let's watch.
What we have learned, I can't quite explain it. We call it a bit of a black box, right? We drop stuff in and stuff comes out. We're really not quite sure what happens inside the black box. We just know if we do this protocol and we wait this long, we're going to get cool stuff out on the other side.
I'm not going to lie, I really dislike this. Later on in the video, they do try to give some kind of explanation, but this to me is disingenuous. I can explain to you what's happening here. It's not that complicated. First, I'm going to break it down in sports science terms, and then I'll talk about it more simply. So when you use the same load week after week after week, you're exposing your body to the same stimulus. And as long as that stimulus is strong enough initially to engender a response, you will get a response out of that stimulus until it ceases to be effective. Essentially what that means is you're starting out with a load that's maybe an RPE 8 or 9, then over time it becomes 7 or 8, 6 or 7, 5 and 6, and then eventually all the way down to 0 and 1 until it's completely and utterly ineffective. In more practical terms, what that means is you're starting out with something that's relatively heavy. As time goes on, it becomes easier for you to lift, and then eventually it becomes so easy that it's not any trouble at all. Again, this isn't magic. This makes sense because the body is an adaptive organism. The body adapts to the stress imposed upon it. And your body can adapt to the same stressor again and again and again. The reason why we add load over time, the reason why we don't just stick with the same load, is that at some point your response to that stressor, to that weight, diminishes. And the best way to make sure you get a strong, robust response to your training is to make sure your training is hard and not easy. So by doing steady state training, by intentionally spending long periods of time in which your training is easy, you are intentionally spending periods of time in which your training doesn't do anything. That's what's happening here. You're actually just wasting your time. Not for all of those 8 or 12 weeks, but probably the latter half of that period is just completely unproductive training. And actually this next example really illustrates this. So he's going to talk about how he trained someone and he put 50 pounds on their deadlift in 12 weeks. Let me roll the clip.
A more straightforward example, deadlifts, and the protocol was 2 to 3 sets of 2 to 3 reps. I had an athlete, Heath, little guy, super strong, but little. We'll call him 112 pounds. And I start him off with 135 pounds. They get their 2 or 3 reps in with this 135, go do some more stuff, come back, get another set, boom. He did that Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And that we don't increase the reps. Now it's early in his training cycle. So Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, there were days where he's like, I'm tired, my back's tired today. Skip it, I don't care. Don't do it today, we'll do it tomorrow. At 135 for those reps and 2 sets for 12 weeks. And he's chomping at the bit. Can I do more? Can I do more? Finally, sure, dude. Go ahead. So he goes to put 10s on it. Now he's going to go, he wants to go from 135 to 155, which for someone who hasn't done steady state is a nice jump. I'm going to have a 20-pound jump. And percentage-wise, that's a big percentage of 135. So I told he, don't waste my time with those bleep, bleep, bleep and 10s. Put 25s on. And he goes, there's no freaking way I can go from 135 to 185. I said, just shut up and put the 25s on the bar. So he puts the 25s on. He's looking at me, kind of the puppy dog eyes. I'll do it, but you're going to feel really bad when I explode and I die. And I said, yeah, whatever. Just put the damn weight on the bar. So he puts it on and he grabs the bar. Remember, only 135 for 3 months. The 185 just flies off the floor. And he does his reps and his eyes get huge. And he's like, what the?
There's really two things wrong here with this story. For one, this isn't a great rate of progress for a beginner. Now, I understand that this lifter is light. He's not very heavy. But for a novice, untrained male to add 50 pounds to his deadlift in 12 weeks, that is not impressive. That's still progress. I'm not trying to knock the guy. There's no issues with that. But he could have made far better, far quicker progress if he'd simply sought to add weight every week. What if instead of keeping the load the same, he had just added 5 or 10 pounds every week? I'm certain he would have added more than 50 pounds. And I don't think he would have gotten hurt. There seems to be this presumption behind this that weightlifting is incredibly injurious, that people are going to just fall apart and combust. And I also think that's the huge problem with this methodology. If you listen to this story, the trainee in the example touted by the trainee expresses that he lacks confidence in his own ability to lift those weights. He's actually afraid and intimidating. That's not a good training outcome. He's become habituated to that 135. He's become used to it. And so lifting more is actually more intimidating to him. If instead he'd adopted a more progressive mindset, if he had trained more progressively, he would have understood that progression should be the norm in training. It's not the exception. It's not magic. You don't have to do the same thing for 12 weeks in order to make progress. So as a result of this training paradigm, as a result of this method, we've actually made the trainee more fragile. Despite the fact that he's stronger on paper, mentally he's weaker because he thinks he has to lift the same weight for 12 weeks in order to make progress. And he doesn't. And that's a huge issue for me with this. I really dislike this because it just teaches people the wrong lesson. It teaches people to be stagnant rather than to seek and strive for progress. I'm going to roll one last clip here because he does attempt to provide some kind of explanation for how this training paradigm works. Let me roll it now.
So I broke steady state into, in my mind, stages. So we have overload, load, and underload.
So you see here, he uses these phrases overload, load, and underload. That makes sense. That's precisely what I was talking about. What he's describing is that initially that load is challenging, it becomes less challenging, and then eventually it becomes so easy that it no longer poses any challenge at all. So if you want to train like this, a far simpler, more efficient way to do this is just to have deloads. That's what he's essentially doing, right? During this 8 to 12 period block, maybe 4-6 weeks is essentially an active deload where training is occurring, but no actual progress is happening. What you could do instead is just take a week off, maybe 2, and then go back to it. You'd achieve the same results in less time, and you wouldn't have to waste your time lifting the same weight again and again and again and again. I know I've been very critical of this, but I think this training does have some practical application. The best setting for something like this is with a group sport, with a group of athletes who are all working in the same space. In a setting like that, where you're not really trying to maximize your weightlifting outcomes, you're not trying to maximize strength, you're just trying to keep people fit and healthy and active, a program like this actually could make sense. But again, that's because we're sort of accepting that the goal of the program isn't to maximize results, it's to keep athletes moving. I also think that experienced lifters actually do implement a version of this in their own training. Bodybuilders will often use the phrase that they're getting used to a weight. They'll start with something that's heavy and maybe a little bit sloppy, and then they'll stick with it for a couple weeks until it gets clean and relatively easy. That makes sense to me, and that's another version of this. The difference in the example of the bodybuilder is that the bodybuilder is an athlete who understands his body, and he knows when to move up in weight. He's not sticking with the same weight for a predetermined period of time. He's waiting until he reaches certain performance outcomes, and once he reaches those outcomes, he then adds weight. That to me is a far more logical approach to this. I think my biggest issue here is the sort of predetermined nature of it. There's no indication as to when you should add more weight. You're just kind of waiting and biding your time. Lastly, I do want to make one final point. Let's say you're a competitive athlete in a non-weightlifting sport and you just want to maintain your strength. Should you do a program like this? I would actually say no, because there really is no such thing in strength training as complete maintenance training. As long as your training program is well designed, you should still be making slight neurological gains at all times. And so that means in practice that if you're staying stagnant for a long period of time, your training program just doesn't work. It isn't actually doing anything at all. And at that point, I'm not sure why you're doing it. Even when you have other goals, you should still be striving to make minute progress over time. And this is true for older trainees, younger trainees. This is true for anyone who actually has real, tangible goals in the gym. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this video useful, please don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Appreciate you.